Did you wake up today feeling an emptiness that you can't quite explain? It's not sadness, it's not exactly loneliness. It's something deeper, quieter, a strange feeling that the people around you are wrong, that the bonds you have so carefully built have begun to loosen without you asking, that conversations that used to flow now seem dry, that you're distancing yourself from people who were once essential in your life. And most disturbing of all, part of you doesn't feel guilty about it. And then comes the internal judgment, is there something wrong with me? No, absolutely not. What's happening to you has a name, but it's not the name most people give it. Most call it loneliness. Some call it a crisis. Others of ingratitude. But psychology and spirituality, when they go together, point to something completely different. You are going through a process of removal. A cleanse that was not requested by you, but that was necessary for you. God or the universe or life, whatever name makes the most sense to you, doesn't remove people from your life to punish you. It withdraws to protect you from paths that would divert you from what you really are. And the problem is that it hurts exactly like a loss. The human brain does not distinguish the pain of an abandonment from the pain of a liberation, at least not in the beginning. Therefore, you feel as loneliness what is actually space being opened. Space for what? That's exactly what we're going to explore here. In this video, you'll understand why certain people leave your life at times when you need them most, why your intuition starts to create distance before your conscious mind even realizes why, and what happens inside you when you stop resisting that process and start trusting it. But first, I need to tell you something that will change how you see everything that came before this moment. The loneliness you're feeling isn't a sign that you've missed something. It's a sign that you're about to find something much bigger. Stay with me. When someone disappears from your life without explanation, there is a type of loss that has no funeral, no scheduled date, no formal farewell. It's that silent loss of someone who simply left your life little by little, sometimes so slowly that you only realized it when it was gone for good. No fight, no decisive discussion, no clear moment of rupture. Only absence, and this absence weighs in a different way, because you don't know exactly what to regret. Psychology calls this ambiguous loss. It is considered one of the most difficult forms of grief because the human brain needs closure, a clear endpoint to start the healing process. When someone dies, there are rituals, there is farewell, there is a narrative that begins and ends. When someone simply disappears, the brain is in a loop, going through conversations, looking for signs that should have been obvious, trying to find the exact moment when everything started to fall apart. But here's what no one tells you about these quiet exits. They're rarely accidents. There is almost always a logic behind them, even if neither you nor the other person can articulate it clearly. People disappear from your life when the role they played in it has been exhausted, when the version of you they knew no longer exists, when what connected you was convenience, stage of life, or a mutual need that either side no longer feels. From the point of view of evolutionary psychology, human beings are deeply relational, but also highly sensitive to changing dynamics. When you grow up, when you change values, when you start occupying different spaces, some people around you feel it before you even realize it consciously. And they drift away not necessarily out of malice, but out of growing incompatibility. It is like two rivers that for a while ran parallel and that, due to the geography of the terrain, naturally begin to follow different directions. The problem is that our culture doesn't teach us to honor these exits. We are taught that relationships that last are successful and that relationships that end are failures. This is one of the biggest lies we carry. The duration of a relationship is not a measure of its value. Some people come into your life to teach you something specific, to be present at a specific chapter, and the greatest honor you can do to that connection is to acknowledge when the chapter is over, without trying to force an artificial new beginning. Research in social neuroscience shows that the brain processes social rejection in the same regions that it processes physical pain. This explains why someone's absence can literally hurt in the chest, it can take away appetite, it can disturb sleep. It is not emotional weakness, it's biology. You've been wired to care about bonds, and when they break, your nervous system registers as threatening. But there is a fundamental difference between feeling that pain and letting it rewrite the narrative of your life. Many people, when someone disappears without explanation, internalize the absence as confirmation of a limiting belief they already had about themselves, that they are not enough, that they are difficult to love, that they always end up alone. And from there, they begin to build walls, not to protect themselves from new losses, but to punish themselves in advance for them. The most liberating truth that psychology and spirituality converge is this. When someone disappears from your life without explanation, The universe is sparing you from a conversation that they would not be able to have with you. It's saving you years of trying to make someone understand what can only be understood by those who are at the same level of consciousness as you. It is not abandonment, it is direction. The question you need to stop asking is, why did they leave? The question that will set you free is, what remains when they go? Because what remains, your values, your essence, your ability to love, is exactly what will attract those who really need to be in your story. Why do you start drifting away unintentionally? Has it ever happened to you to be in a conversation and realize right in the middle of it that you have nothing more to say? Not because you ran out of topics, but because you realize that that subject no longer interests you. That person is talking about a world that you no longer inhabit. And then comes the guilt. Am I being arrogant? Am I thinking of myself? What's wrong with me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing is wrong with you. What is happening has a name in psychology. It is the phenomenon of dissonance of values. When you grow up, and here growing doesn't mean getting better than anyone else, but simply evolving internally, you begin to develop a more refined value system. And this system comes into friction with connections that were based on values that you no longer hold. Psychologist Jean Piaget described human development as a series of imbalances and rebalances. Every time you learn something new about yourself or the world, your inner balance is upset, and you have to reorganize yourself. This process of reorganization inevitably affects your relationships because you are no longer the same point of reference as you once were. And some people around you just don't know how to relate to this new version of you. There is also what psychologists call emotional contagion, the tendency of our nervous system to synchronize with the emotional state of the people around us. When you're in a phase of internal expansion, when you're calmer, more focused, more intentional, and around you there are people who live in a mode of constant drama, chronic complaining, recurrent victimization, your nervous system begins to create a natural distance. It is not judgment, it is physiological self-preservation. What many people don't realize is that this gradual withdrawal often begins in the body before reaching the conscious mind. You start to feel a specific tiredness after certain interactions, a specific lightness after certain absences. Your body is reading the relational environment long before you have the words to describe what you're feeling. Intuition, from a neuroscientific point of view, is the accelerated processing of patterns that the brain already recognizes but has not yet encoded into language. There's a fascinating concept in systems theory called structural coupling, the idea that two systems can only interact sustainably when they have compatible structures. Apply this to human relationships. Two people can only maintain a living connection when their inner worlds have real touch points. When you change structurally, when your fears change, your joys change, your questions about life change, some connections just miss the touch point. And without a point of contact, there is no way to sustain the bond. There is also a factor that is rarely discussed, the fear of the growth of others. When you start to change, some people around you feel it as an unconscious threat. Not because they want to see you bad, but because your change mirrors for them what they themselves have not yet done. And this mirror can be too uncomfortable. Then they move away or try to pull you back to what you were, through subtle criticism, excessive nostalgia, comments that question your new way of being. When you notice this pattern, the temptation is to shrink back, to be less, to talk less about what you're discovering, to pretend you haven't changed that much to preserve the relationship. This is one of the most subtle forms of betrayal of oneself. And the cost of this betrayal accumulates in anxiety, in a sense of falsehood, in exhaustion that has no apparent cause. If you're accidentally walking away from certain people, before you blame yourself, ask yourself honestly, does that pulling away make me lighter or heavier? Because not every withdrawal is an escape. Some withdrawals are your soul asking for space to be what you already are. The pain that feels like loneliness but isn't loneliness and solitude are words that seem synonymous but that live in opposite universes. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from the world. Solitude is the peace of being with yourself. The problem is that when you're going through a process of removing people, when your circle is shrinking, when old connections are dissolving, what you feel on the outside looks like loneliness. But what's going on inside, if you pay attention, can be something else entirely. Researcher Vivek Murthy, a former Surgeon General of the United States, spent years studying the epidemic of modern loneliness and came to a disturbing conclusion. Most people who declare themselves lonely are not necessarily alone. They are surrounded by people, but people with whom they do not feel truly seen. Real loneliness is not the absence of bodies around. It is the absence of genuine connection. That changes everything. because it means that you can be in a crowded room and feel devastating loneliness, and you can be completely alone and feel a deep fullness. What determines what you feel is not the number of people around you, but the quality of the presence you have with yourself and others. When God or life begins to remove people from your path, there is a period of transition in which the space that has been liberated has not yet been filled by anything. This gap between what has left and what has not yet arrived is where most people fall apart. Because silence bothers us, because the absence of social noise forces you to listen to yourself. And often, what you hear when you stop being distracted by others is exactly what you have been most avoiding facing. Psychology calls this the window of vulnerability, a period when your habitual defenses are down and you're more exposed to your own emotions. The instinctive reaction of most people is to fill that space as quickly as possible. Any company, any conversation, any distraction that makes the silence stop. But this rush to fill the void often results in bringing back exactly the kind of shallow connection you just got rid of. What would be necessary, and what is deeply counterintuitive, is to sit through this discomfort. Not to suffer more, but to understand what he is trying to tell you. Because all emotional pain is a message before it is a problem. And the message of the pain that feels like loneliness but isn't usually is, you're ready for a deeper level of connection than what you had. There's a fascinating study from the University of Chicago that showed that people who learned to tolerate periods of solitude, without the compulsion to fill each moment with external stimulation, develop a greater capacity for emotional intimacy. This may seem paradoxical, but it makes perfect sense. When you learn to base yourself, you stop looking for in others what only you can give. And then you enter relationships by genuine choice, not out of desperate necessity. The pain you're feeling right now isn't evidence that you're missing out. It's evidence that you're between chapters. And between chapters, it's always uncomfortable. Because the old is no longer useful and the new hasn't arrived yet. But this space between chapters is where the most profound transformations take place. It's where you discover who you are when you don't have anyone to perform. So the next time the pain hits and you call it loneliness, stop and ask, is this loneliness, or is it my nervous system learning to exist without a relational crutch that I no longer needed? The answer to this question may be one of the most liberating you've ever given yourself. What changes in you? When the cycle closes, there is a silent phenomenon that happens every time a relational cycle closes in your life. Something inside you changes in a way that you may not notice right away, but that becomes more and more evident in the months that follow. You start to speak differently, choosing different environments, reacting to situations that previously unbalanced you with a calm that surprises you, as if a frequency that was distorted had finally found the right tone. Neuroscience has an elegant explanation for this: relational neuroplasticity. Every relationship you have literally shapes neural circuits in your brain. The conversations you have repeatedly, the emotional patterns you frequently activate, the ways of seeing the world that are reinforced by the people around you, all of these leave physical imprints on the architecture of your brain. When a relationship ends, especially a long and intense one, the brain has to literally remodel these circuits. This remodeling process is what many people confuse with loss of identity. I don't recognize myself anymore, they say. And they are right, but not in the way they think. They are not losing who they are. They are losing who they were because of that specific relationship. And this is profoundly different, because who you were because of someone else was never fully you. It was an adapted version, shaped by the expectations, needs, and dynamics of that connection. Carl Jung had a concept he called individuation, the process by which a person becomes progressively more himself, more whole, less fragmented among the roles he plays for others. Every time a relational cycle closes, you have an opportunity for individuation, a chance to recover parts of yourself that you had deposited in that relationship, which you had outsourced to the other to keep. Think about how many versions of yourself you have been over the years as a function of different relationships. The version that was quieter so as not to bother someone. The version that pretended not to care about certain things because the other didn't care. The version that stifled ambitions, dreams, tastes, opinions to keep the peace or to be accepted. When that relationship ends, these silenced versions begin to emerge again, and that can be unsettling because you're no longer sure how to integrate them. That's why many people, after closing an important cycle, go through a phase of intense rediscovery, sometimes embarrassing for outsiders. They resume old hobbies, change their style of dress, start going to places they would never go before, make choices that seem impulsive but are actually the expression of desires that have been stored for years. This is not a crisis, it is recovery of oneself, But there is a dark side to this process that needs to be named: the tendency to repetition. Psychology shows that if a cycle closes without you extracting the learning it contained, you will unconsciously create the conditions to attract a similar situation, with different characters but with the same script. The universe, or your unconscious, will keep presenting the same lesson in different packages until you finally learn it. The most important question you can ask when a cycle closes is not, "What did I lose?" but rather, "What did this cycle teach me about what I still needed to heal in myself?" Because relationships are always mirrors. The people who come to you reflect what is active within you, both your beauties and your unresolved wounds. When the cycle closes and you can look in the mirror honestly, what you see is not the face of someone who failed to maintain a relationship. It is the face of someone who is progressively becoming more whole, more real, more capable of genuine connections. And that is worth every pain along the way. The right people come after the void. There is an unwritten law in human relationships that most people never learn because they never stop quiet enough to observe it. Emptiness precedes fulfillment. Not because life is cruel, but because space must exist before it can be inhabited. You cannot receive what you do not have room to receive. And if you spend your life filling every relational gap with what's available, you never create the conditions for what really serves to appear. There is a concept in quantum physics called the superposition state, the idea that a particle can exist in multiple states simultaneously until an observation fixes it in a specific state. Apply this metaphorically to human connections. While you are in the void, while you are between relationships, you exist in a state of maximum openness. Any kind of connection can materialize. But when you rush out of the void and fixate on the first available option, you collapse that opening before exploring what was possible. Research on adult attachment, developed from the pioneering work of John Bowlby and then expanded by Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver, shows that the attachment style you developed in childhood largely determines how you react to relational emptiness in adulthood. People with anxious attachment tend to fill the void urgently, tolerating connections below what they need just so they don't get lonely. People with secure attachment are able to remain in the void without panic, trusting that suitable connections will emerge at the right time. The good news is that attachment styles are not destiny. They are learned patterns, and learned patterns can be revised. But this work of revision only happens in a vacuum, when you stop using new relationships as anesthesia for the wounds that the old ones have left, and start looking at those wounds with the intention of understanding them. Here's something that spirituality and psychology say in unison. People who arrive after the void arrive different. They arrive with a quality of presence that you didn't find before. They come in with an ability to see you that the previous people didn't have, not because these new people are superior, but because you've changed what radiates. You attract what you are, not what you want. And in the void, if you've done the inner work, you become a different frequency. There is a phenomenon that therapists often observe. Clients who have gone through an intentional period of solitude, without romantic relationships, with a reduced social circle, with room for genuine introspection, return to the relational world with a capacity for choice that they did not have before. They stop relating for fear of being alone and start relating out of genuine affinity. And this change in motivation completely transforms the quality of the connections they attract. But there is a subtle trap in this process: idealization. After a period of emptiness, especially if it was painful, the tendency is to create an excessively high expectation about the people who come next, as if the suffering you went through credited you with the right to a perfect relationship. This is human and it's dangerous, because real people have real limitations. And if you enter a new connection seeking perfection that the previous one didn't have, you'll sabotage something good before it has a chance to grow. The right people don't arrive perfect. They arrive compatible. They come in with the same questions you're asking, with the same pursuits you're pursuing, with a willingness to grow that resonates with yours. And when that compatibility appears, you'll recognize it not with a flash of adrenaline, but with an uncanny peace. A sense of, "Oh, that's it," soft and firm at the same time. Endure the emptiness. It is not punishment, it's preparation. How to stop fighting, what's setting you free. The greatest irony of the human journey is that we resist with all our might the very thing we need to go through. When life begins to remove what doesn't serve us, our first response isn't gratitude, it's struggle. We try to recover what is leaving. We try to fix what is dissolving. We try to maintain what has already fulfilled its purpose. And in that fight, we spent enormous energy trying to preserve the very thing that was holding us back. Psychology calls this status quo bias, the cognitive tendency to prefer the current state of affairs, even when that state is objectively bad for us, simply because it is known. The human brain is built to save energy, and the unknown, even when it's better, requires more cognitive energy than the familiar. Therefore, we stay in relationships that diminish us, in social circles that stagnate us, in patterns of connection that exhaust us. Because at least they are known, at least we know what to expect. But there's a price to that resistance that we rarely calculate. The cost of staying where you shouldn't be. Every day you spend forcing a connection that has already run out is a day that you are not available for what could be. Every energy you spend trying to convince someone to stay is an energy that wasn't for your own growth. Every pain you ignore to maintain the appearance that everything is fine is a pain that will grow until it can no longer be ignored. The spirituality of different traditions points to the same principle. Letting go is not giving up. To let go is to trust. It is recognizing that there is a greater intelligence operating in your life. Call it God, the universe, the deep unconscious, that sees beyond what you can see from your limited point of view. And that when this intelligence moves things, removes people, closes doors, it is operating with a logic that your rational mind may not immediately understand, but that your heart, if it is quiet enough, already feels as truth. Accepting does not mean passivity. It means stopping swimming against the current that is taking you to where you need to go. It means distinguishing between fighting for something that has life and fighting for something you just don't want to lose. Because they are completely different struggles. One strengthens you. The other empties you. There is one practice of acceptance and commitment therapy that can transform your relationship with this process. It's called cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe your own thoughts and emotions without merging with them. Instead of "I'm alone and this is unbearable," you learn to say "I'm having the thought that I'm alone and I'm feeling what feels like loneliness." That minimal distance between you and your experience changes everything because it creates space for you to choose how to respond rather than just react. Another key element is what psychologist Kristen Neff calls self-compassion, the ability to treat yourself with the same kindness you would treat a close friend who is going through what you're going through. Many people, in the process of removal and transition, become their own worst critics. They interpret every loss as evidence of failure, every loneliness as punishment, every change as a lack of control. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It is the honest acknowledgement that you are in a difficult process, that this process is part of the universal human experience, and that you deserve kindness as you go through it. Stopping fighting what is setting you free does not happen in an instant of sudden enlightenment. It happens in small daily choices, choosing not to send that message to force a connection that is gone, choosing to stay with the discomfort instead of filling it with anything. Choose to trust that the space that is opening up has a purpose that you do not yet see. It is a practice. It's a muscle. And the more you exercise, the easier it gets. In the end, what the title of this video is saying is this: stop calling loneliness what is actually divine reorganization. Stop calling abandonment what protection is. Stop calling failure what is transition. You are not being left behind. You are being prepared for the future. And the people who are going to walk with you to that one ahead are still coming. Some of them are coming exactly because you have finally stopped holding on to what has been.